There's a number that stops podcast curious entrepreneurial types in their tracks. That number is 4.7 million. That is the number of podcasts that exist in the world as of this recording in May 2026. It always triggers a flood of reactions that usually look something like, the market's obviously saturated, podcasting is too technical, who am I to think I have something worth saying that hasn't already been said? Thoughts like those. They sound like prudence or wisdom, but that doubt spiral is fear doing its best masquerade impression of logic. But the trajectory is always something like, you have the idea, you can see the shape of it, you can even imagine how it will look, feel, sound, you even know why it would matter to your audience, how they would love the background that you've carefully arranged. Side note, mine is just an accumulation of the maximalist life that I lead. And then somewhere between that idea and that vision and hitting record, you decide it's probably not for you, and self-sabotage wins again. And yes, podcasts are everywhere. Pick a niche, and I'm sure there's a podcast associated with it. Shout out to the local firefighter who had the sponsor table next to mine at opening day of softball, baseball season and told me about his podcast, 3 Poor, P-O-U-R, Decisions. He's a sommelier and a firefighter, and he has a podcast. But I digress, as always. That big number I said at the top of this episode belies the reality of the situation. The pervasiveness of podcasting has led to the pervasiveness of podcast consumers, listeners, viewers, however they get their podcasts, wherever they get their podcasts. There is a whole lot more of them than there was just a couple years ago, to the tune of roughly 620 million people worldwide. And in the US, 55% of adults listen every week. They have a podcast habit. And you've probably noticed this behavior in your own self. Once you start listening to podcasts, it snowballs and you want to listen to more podcasts. And the more you listen, the more niche they get. The point is, while podcasting and the everywhereness of it all can be intimidating, it's actually more of an opportunity than a risk. The opportunity is all of those new podcast listeners that were figuratively born over the past couple of years since podcasting has become such a major mainstream phenomenon. The risk is that you will be too intimidated to make your podcast at all. Hi, I'm Courtney Reimer. This is Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting and what it takes to make a show that lasts, reaches and resonates with the right people, and earns its keep without burning you out. Today's episode is about that line between this isn't for me, I'm not the kind of person who could make a podcast, and F it, I'm doing it anyway. My guest today is Kathleen Wisemandle. She's a leadership coach, a recent graduate of my Podcast Accelerator, and most relevant to this conversation, now host of the Rooted Leader podcast. She's a very real, very honest example of what it looks like to move from that state of being someone who doesn't make podcasts to having a live and thriving, regularly publishing podcasts. Here is my conversation with Kathleen Wisemandle. Hello, I am here with Kathleen Wisemandle, who is one of my star graduates of the Podcast Launch Accelerator program and has just been a delight to watch things catch fire with her in this whole podcast adventure. Note to folks trying to work with other people, it's the ones you don't have to chase who are the best, because Kathleen came to me through a friend who was like, Kathleen's wanting to start a podcast and maybe she's a fit for your accelerator. And boy, was she ever. You are just like the avatar of a community member, supportive of your fellow accelerants, great questions, just a dream to have. And I'm so glad to be talking to you here now.
Thank you.
And we can officially refer to you now as a podcaster.
Yes, I'd like to call myself a novice podcaster, but yes.
Don't undersell it. I mean, you've
okay.
already had an iteration, which is awesome, and we will get to that. But I want to know why you came to me and what made you want to start a podcast.
Well, coming to you was easy. You and I had met in a community of entrepreneurs, and it was so lovely to meet you there. I had not at that time ever considered podcasting. I thought that was just out of my comfort zone. And I have to say that when I started thinking about sharing stories of other entrepreneurial women who came from like a more corporate organizational focused life into something a little more risky. I wanted to share their stories because they're not out there and people feel alone. So I thought eventually I want to get to the place where I can help elevate their stories. I was really inspired by Amy Poehler because I felt like some of the stories she and Julia Louis-Dreyfus were bringing up, real people having real struggles and still making it through. I'm like, we don't talk enough about that, at least in the professional setting. And I wanted to have those stories come forth. So I thought I can do this. And then when Kate said you were doing this, I was like, oh my gosh, even better. So I signed up. I'm so glad I did because I learned so much I would not have known. And it just helped minimize my fear.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And of course, you being such a generous person, a lot of people come to podcasting because they're like, I want to raise my profile, more visibility, a platform for me. And you're like, nope, I just want a vehicle to help elevate other people, which I just love so much. So you said you didn't think you ever would have a podcast. What was the thing that clicked and said, okay, wait, actually, I do think I will?
I had to put some pieces together. So I had my own community about a year and a half ago, and it went for a year or so. It was on a platform. It just was a little hard for my community members to sort of access it in real time, but the connection was real. And once I heard the stories that were being shared by Amy Poehler and Julie Louis-Dreyfus, I thought, oh, that's a way to take the goodness and the connection that came from that community and iterate on it in a way that could be meaningful. So we found connection in that sort of we're not done yet feeling in that community. And so that worked. It was the platform that wasn't so easy. But I thought, well, if we can still connect on these types of things in another different sort of way, could it still be useful and carry on? So could I iterate on something that didn't have complete success, but build on the things that did succeed in that to amplify it? And I think just having a more clear purpose allowed me to move in that direction.
Great. And so how has it been different from what you maybe imagined? I mean, looking at people like Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Amy Poehler, who have decades of training of being on mic or in the spotlight, that's like a huge leap to think that you could sit in the same chair. So how has it been different from what you thought it might be, and how has it fit into your life?
I think what you said was you can start small and sort of iterate. And so that gave me permission to try with content I already had. So initially I started with mini-sodes of some leadership content. It was just my voice, which I actually think was harder. So I had a little bit of a perfectionist mindset. So I had to edit the heck out of those things. My first episode's not so great because it's scripted. And then the next ones, I'm trying harder not to be scripted, but I'm talking more slowly. They're okay. And they're under 15 minutes. So my hope was I could reach people who don't get invested in coaching with some coaching content. And then I decided to launch into the interviews, which was really what I wanted to do. And fortunately for me as a leadership coach, it came a little more naturally. So I used a lot of the tips you had, a framework of questions, understanding the archetype of the guests that I would be including, and have it be a conversation, like you said. So it is nice that I don't stay so scripted. I feel a lot more natural. I think it probably comes through better, and it's certainly more fun, but it's allowed me to have more confidence as I move there. And also, I love so much that you helped us with the editing, which would have been super scary and not even knowing where to go in terms of tools to use. You helped us with that. And using Descript for me was something I was doing when I wasn't interviewing anyone, but just recording myself. And then moving into Squadcast and Descript with the interviews has been fairly natural.
Okay. Thank you for saying the kind things. It lights me up to know that things that I said have helped you get to where you are. So much to grow on here. So I am curious, and this whole thing, as you know, my podcast, I'm going through the same journey or trajectory. Even though I've been doing this for decades, I'm still learning, and I am in a different role than I've ever been in podcasting. And so I like to get tips from the people who are learning from me. I can learn from you. So the editing thing, this is a bit of a tangent. But you mentioned that you're a perfectionist. Yes, hi. I haven't recovered at all. We should have like a whole separate group therapy session about perfectionism. So yes, I am still editing my own podcast, which is really not a great use of my time, but I also enjoy it / it's fun. Right?
I love it.
You do. But it's also maybe not the best use of your time either. But tell me how it's going. How does it feel? Do you think you'll continue to do it indefinitely, or will you ever bring on help?
I don't think I'll bring on help. When I first started doing the minisodes, they were weekly, and that was a lot on myself, I felt. And again, I was editing a lot more because I was worried about how I was sounding.
Same.
This doesn't bother me as much in the interview format because I feel it's just much more natural. I've only edited one of the interviews, so it wasn't so bad. So I think it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I intend to release every other week for a while, and let's just see how that goes. So that feels doable right now with the workload I have in.
Good. I have a very much love-hate dysfunctional relationship with editing, but I hear you. There's something that's very creative in a way. But editing aside, it's interesting that you mention, and I think this is a lot of people's assumption going into podcasting, especially people who, the common saying, I don't like the sound of my voice or I hate the sound of my voice, which is why people steer away from having a solo kind of monologue episode. However, you know how I feel about having it all rest on an interview format, because I feel like for lots of reasons, if you're only doing the interviews, first of all, you're not getting your moment in the sun, which I know doesn't matter to you because you like to highlight other people.
You know, a little bit. I do want my voice out there as a coach. So
yeah, but it's funny. I had someone on my show who's, I think she's 275 episodes deep into her podcast. For real. Her name's Deb Boulanger, and I got to give her a shout out. Life After Corporate is her company and her brand, and she helps women transition, sort of like you, from corporate into entrepreneur life. And anyway, she said to me that even she, who leads cohorts and groups and coaches people, feels this onerousness of the solo episode, which surprised me. But my whole thing is, if you're relying on other people, and maybe it's a control freak thing, but it's also a logistics thing. Like if you cancel today and I was certain I wanted to release it on Tuesday, what would I do? What if I didn't know how to do a solo episode? So
yeah.
What are your thoughts on mixing up episode formats? Or do you think you'll just keep leaning into interview?
No. I love it. And I would not have known that. And the other thing was I was thinking about having two separate podcasts. Mm-hmm. Remember, I started with one and sort of a different title. And one of our cohort members, Nita, said, why can't it all be under one? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. I can just have, in my own mind, I hadn't thought about having different types within one umbrella. And so I have the Rooted Leader podcast, the minisodes, but then I have Leader Reflections, which was initially having like a 5-minute leaders who are in my network pontificating on the topic of the minisode, saying their perspective on it.
So they listen to one of your episodes and it's like a reaction to it? Okay.
Well, kind of. So my topic, I had the human side of change. So I think Nita was the one who had her leader reflection on that. And it was beautiful. I had one on courage, and someone else reflected on courage and what it meant to him. And I can't remember the other one. The first one was so beautiful. Pamela Isom had given her perspective on how important discernment was to her making a pivot. And it was beautiful. And it's just nice to hear other voices. So it was before I was ready for a full interview, but it was a nice way to get other voices out there in a 5-minute format. So I just said, hey, send me an MP3 sound clip of you about 3 minutes. I'll edit it. I'll do an intro and then put you out there. And it was kind of nice. I don't even know how it came to me, but it was so nice to hear their perspectives.
I love this so much. And this is the thing, like we think about the genesis of podcasting around the time that Serial came out, even though it'd been around longer than that. This American Life. Yeah. So it's been around for probably, depends on what you consider the genesis of podcasting, but a couple decades. Yeah. And yet every day people are inventing new ways of making a podcast, what a podcast is. You're the first person who said to me, I had someone send me an MP3 file and then I made it into an episode. I love that. I love that you're inventing new ways of podcasting.
Oh,
it's so
man.
Cool.
Anyway, it was really nice because it was a low lift for them. You know, I have people in my network, my friends, that are doing some brave things and they don't know how to necessarily amplify their voices. And if I can give them 5 minutes on somebody connects with them who might not have, that's really awesome.
So, hey, if you're listening to this and thinking, I know a podcast would be good for my business, but I have no idea what I'm doing, it's your lucky day because I am opening applications for my Sounds Great Podcast Launch Accelerator. It is a small group program designed for entrepreneurs who want to build a podcast that works for them and their business without adding a ton more work to their lives. Live masterclasses led by yours truly, along with one-on-ones for for you to work with me directly on anything from editing your first episode to coaching on how to conduct an excellent interview to tutorials on the tools I use to create this very thing you're listening to right now. The cohorts who've completed the Podcast Launch Accelerator have the most flattering things to say about what it helped them achieve. Like, I couldn't have done it without Courtney, etc. At the end, you'll have a clear concept, title, positioning, and you'll have an actual podcast out there in the world with a trailer that we'll build together. So if you've been thinking about going for it with a podcast and you don't want to go it alone, learn more about the Sounds Great Podcast Launch Accelerator at soundsgreatstrategy.com. What has surprised you the most so far? How far are you into your podcast? How many episodes, and what has been most surprising?
I might be at 13. I think 9 are released, and that includes the minis, the micros. I enjoy it.
Great.
I didn't think I would enjoy it as much. And the interviews are even more fun. I walked away from an interview this morning, interviewing a peer that I went to graduate school with a few years back, and she just made a pivot away from a corporate career into like becoming a chaplain. And it was so beautiful to hear her journey in her words, because those are some of the things I'm experiencing in our own self-worth as we move away from something structured and defines our worth in a certain way. And now we define it differently. And so sometimes it's hard to reckon with that. So it was just nice to interview her and not only share her story, but feel the same joy and understanding that a listener might.
Hey, I'm thrilled to hear that you're having more fun than you thought. Where has it been harder, and how have you accommodated yourself, or what shifts have you made? Because the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, especially for women of a certain age, which we are, is to keep going, because we pod fade the most. What has helped you keep going if it ever got hard at any moment?
The hard part for me was I was spending a lot of time editing and creating the minisodes because it was just my voice. I could tell I was being really critical with myself. And it was nice to then say, okay, I think I'm ready for the interviews. It gave me a chance to change the timing, the frequency, so from weekly to every other week, and then to mix it up a little bit. So I was releasing myself of some of that performance pressure to go into the interviews. And that's really helped me enjoy it more. But as you mentioned, I will go back to the minisodes because I'm hearing feedback from people who are saying, Kathleen, I really love that episode on the human side of change, because now I'm going to use that as design component for XYZ. And so I'm like, okay, that's meaningful. And I do read a lot of books. So this is my way of giving content back that's useful.
I love this. It's sort of an unquestioned doctrine in podcasting that you release every week, period, full stop, right? And I'm finding that difficult. And so I've had to give myself grace. In my more recent cohort of the accelerator, I said to them, and this is something that happens now in the accelerator, as I'm learning, I will sort of adapt what I teach, if you will, or the sort of frameworks to allow them to be more adaptable. So for instance, I said, when you go look at a podcast player or show page or whatever, it'll say episodes drop every Wednesday. Do not commit to a day until you're sure that you can make episodes drop every Wednesday. And I would even say, if you are doing a seasonal format, if you're doing season 1, which I recommend, don't commit to a day up front, because then you'll feel like you've made a promise you haven't kept, and that's going to feel crappy. And you're already feeling crappy because you're not putting out as much as you think you should. But also, I just had a moment, like literally 5 minutes before we recorded, that it's a novel idea to some people that their podcast can take a vacation or a week off. And so I've told people, and I'm telling you now, if I haven't before, you can, over a holiday, say, here's our best of. And by that, it's not a whole new episode. It's not, here are clips from the best moments. It's we're putting in your feed again an episode you might have missed, but was a hit with the audience. And that gives you a week off. And it gives that episode more exposure to people who may not have seen it or heard it. What I'm about to tell you is I have a new way of framing that, because I was like, oh, I got to get an episode out this week. But I'm in this particular mindset, which is I've been told yet again, it's ridiculous that I don't have an email list that I'm aggressively promoting and growing and all of that. It's like, I have a lot going on, guys. This podcast first, one of my first episodes was called People Will Say You Have to Have a Newsletter. There's Another Way. And so because it was one of my launch episodes, and I'm saying this, who knows, I'll edit it out if I don't end up doing this, rather than it being a best of, because it's too early in my talking the talk journey to call it a best of, what I might do is re-release it and say, reminder, People say you need a newsletter. So repeat the title, and it's like a reminder of the point of this solo episode that I made that basically got buried. And I say this to you because it seems like you have a sleeper hit further down in your feed that deserves more exposure and more daylight. And you're totally invited and welcome and encouraged to re-release those episodes however you want.
I love that. I absolutely will do that. Actually, my first episode, I thought about re-recording because it's great content, but I sounded really not great. I was basically reading it. I was a little bit nervous, but I think it's good. It might be worthwhile. But I love that. And you had told us about the seasons. Otherwise, I would have thought a season would have been a whole calendar year. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't pay that close of attention, but I did. My first season was just 9 episodes. And then I took a 2-week break. I had a vacation planned and I did one of those leader reflections and the week off. So I really didn't have to do anything but create the intro. And I think the next week I just let myself say, hey, there's nothing there. I'm good.
I think unless you are Amy Poehler or
Exactly.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, wouldn't we love to have legions of people just waiting on their podcast app for our next episode to come out? They're not. Right now, we're still in the building phase, and it's okay to let those episodes breathe. And I want to just say that again, because every time I go to a new episode, I'll be like, I didn't give that one enough time to pull out the different quotes that were so resonant and the sound bites and the guests to share their favorite. If you're doing it every week, time goes too fast for it to have the due attention. Now, I will just say the reason why it is such a given that we have to release every week is because the podcast apps don't have an algorithm per se. So that's the only way in which things are surfaced is recency. And so I will say there is value to that. But I don't know if you're on YouTube, and we can pivot to talking YouTube.
I am.
YouTube is more of an evergreen platform, right? And so that's where the algorithm does come into play. And it is okay to take a break because maybe that last episode you got has a lot of capital for YouTube that will still get discovered even if you take a couple weeks off. Tell me what YouTube's been like for you.
I haven't gone back in very often to see my stats there, but I seem to get hits on the shorts. I use Substack for the hosting there, and it will upload to everything, including YouTube. And you had initially said, try to do the video. So my initial minisodes actually have just stock pictures and then the words, the captions. So it could be found there. And I did okay with the shorts, but nobody's really going to the full episode on YouTube. But it'll be interesting to see how this changes with the video format for the interviews because it's actually video.
You're going to go for a full-on, full-length video episode on YouTube, yeah?
Yeah, I actually have one up, so I'll have to double check and see how it's doing. But in general, because of Substack, I can send it to my email subscribers, which I imported my list from my newsletter. They're opening it. And then I love how you said, go ahead and just then create an article or post about it and link it in. And what I've tried to do there is also then in the podcast, at least with the minisodes, I would build on previous topics. And so then I could link them all in there and say, remember episode 1, we talked about growth mindset. Yeah, it's just interesting. To me, it's kind of like a big puzzle and it's fun to figure it out. It's complex and I love that challenge.
Yeah. Thinking about, as I am always, about the amount of effort that goes into it and how much do we get out of it. And I know even just the joy of the conversation, like the one we're having right now, this is a form of ROI to me to be able to reconnect with you and hear how you're doing
Me too.
and get ideas. So tell me what kind of non-download or numbers type of ROI you've gotten from your podcast.
Well, I love the fact that I'm reconnecting with people who mean a lot to me or have been important to my journey of where I am right now. I've had people just be so excited to be asked to be on it. So I have at least 3 or 4 in the queue of interviews that are planned ahead. So I'm so excited to, again, it's about this generative phase of, sure, I get to talk with them, but then I get to highlight them because they're amazing people. That's pretty cool. The initial minisodes, when I started hearing people who said one of the episodes is about going through change, and it can be work change or it can be personal change, but typically it's about work. And there's these different phases. And somebody said a friend of mine listened and had realized they had never had that letting go phase of letting go of a job that they'd lost. And just knowing, being able to name it was so important for them. That was the ROI right there. It could have just been that one person. It would have been worth it.
Totally. I'm with you. When I got my first, I think I even shared it on Circle in our group, like, you guys, I got an email. Someone right after listening emailed me and said they listened to all 3 episodes and that it was something they needed to hear. And I was just like, cool, I will keep going because I connected with someone and gave them something they needed to hear in their own podcast journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me some signs, maybe even beyond that one, that has shown you like, okay, this is working. This is something I should keep doing.
I've interviewed 3 people now, and 2 of them, specifically women, have said, thank you so much for sharing these stories. We would have really loved to have known there were other stories out there like ours. When we're going through something that's scary and you have a lot of courage going in, you doubt yourself quite a bit, and just knowing that there's other folks out there that feel somewhat similar just gives you a little more courage, let you lean in a little bit more. And it was nice to hear from them saying that.
Yeah, I'm seeing what you mean about highlighting people. And Shri in our cohort, you know, the first cohort, her podcast idea was based on she wished a certain type of podcast existed. And when she went looking for it for herself, as she's a young entrepreneur, it didn't exist. She was like, well, I guess I have to make it because it doesn't exist. And it sounds kind of like that's what you're doing for people and also yourself in a way.
Also myself. I want to say that it definitely helps me more than I thought, but it was one of the reasons I thought about doing it was we need more of those voices. It was the real reason I created the community, which was called The Journey, was that I wanted to make sure that people who felt they wanted to do more, especially second career, as we move into our 50s, that they didn't feel they were alone, because the typical corporate life tells us we're done. And we're like, we're not even close to done. Are you kidding me? So just knowing that in those circles, we don't see people like us typically, but there are a lot of us. We just don't have that connection or community yet.
Obviously, I love community. And tell me, how has it been? Has my hypothesis been correct that Substack is a place where there can be conversation around the podcast? Has that happened, or do you have to seed it? Or
I have not. I need to do some work there. Yeah, I'm trying, because I'm doing some roundtable discussions on different topics, and I'd love to bring that to the Substack community. I need to just lean into it a little bit more. It's something I need to put on my to-do list. I have something crafted, but I'm not leaning into it enough to really try to build that yet.
Well, something I'm seeing in you is that you're very good at one step at a time, not drinking from the fire hose all at once, not trying to do all of the things. And seeing you, I think people's fear if they don't start doing everything at once, video, interviews, everything, they might not ever, they'll get too comfortable. But what I'm seeing in you is so promising. You're like, okay, I've got this part down. I'm going to evolve to this. And then I'm going to evolve to this. And you're patient with yourself. Or at least you appear to be, and then you go to the next. And that's great. That's like the model of how people should do this, because it's going to not burn you out. And that's the key.
And you taught us that, because Courtney, I wouldn't have taken this approach had you not given us that permission. Like, I didn't know that was a possibility. And that was so generous to allow us that information we wouldn't have known on our own, because it did give us that permission to start a little bit differently than we had envisioned. And I'm going to get our cohort peers on my podcast too. I reached out, but they're not quite ready yet. But when they are, I'm so excited, because it was really neat to learn with them too.
Yeah, I think we should. And that brings me back to another thing I wanted to say, that you're planning this roundtable. There's this saying that everything is content. And honestly, now that I know about this whole, I mean, I've been in journalism and media for decades. The whole feed the beast. So you have to keep creating, always be creating. But there's a flip side to that, where it's like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. And for instance, I have an event coming up where it's going to be a fireside chat about podcasting and the value of podcasting and the realities of it. And I'm going to record it, and I'm going to maybe make it an episode. And I say this to you because you should too. If you're doing a roundtable, people do it all the time. Make that into an episode.
I should ask my attendees to see if they'd be open to it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, because it's vulnerable stuff though, right?
Yeah.
So at least the topic we're talking about, but I can certainly use takeaways from it to say, these are some of the things we're talking about.
I will say, just to push you on it a little bit, that I use Esther Perel as an example a lot. And she started Where Should We Begin when I was at Audible. And her episodes were these basically fly on the wall experience of the listener in a couples counseling session, right? And that is as vulnerable as it gets.
That is, for sure.
But the names have been changed to protect the innocent, or whatever the line is in Law and Order, wherever that came from. But I say this to you as, okay, maybe your roundtable may not want to reveal their identity in that, but they may still feel Similar to how you've had feedback that people have liked that you're sharing stories that so often don't get shared, you might be surprised. I would love to hear what happens if you ask your roundtable, like, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it, but maybe would you be okay if I protected your identity, if I put this into a podcast somehow for the benefit of other people? Just putting it out there, just still coaching you, Kathleen. That's
Yeah, I love it. Well, I appreciate that. I like the challenge, honestly, to say I love variety. It's how my brain stays engaged. And if I can do that, I'm sure the listeners benefit from that too. So
Exactly. And there's a through line of stories being shared, right? There's a way to make it consistent and not feel jarring to the listener that this new format is in there. It's all experimentation at this stage.
We were absolutely talking about that this morning with my friend, is that this whole process of rediscovering who we are and the value or impact we can make is about experimenting. Not everything lands, but it informs the next step. So being more comfortable with that is cool. I'm good with it.
Good. Okay, just to kind of wrap up this part of it, let's say someone is exactly where you were maybe at the start of like our accelerator, questioning yourself, not sure if it's even going to work. What would you tell them?
Talk with Courtney. I just love the community, right? Like we were all in it together. And the fact that cohort members were bringing up questions I hadn't even thought of was so helpful. And I'd love to learn. So it was just a really great setting for me to explore and experiment. The templates were fantastic to spur my thoughts and ideas. And I couldn't be where I am right now without it. And even though it's not a monetary journey for me, it certainly contributes, I think, to my journey as a leadership coach and getting exposure to others who might want to invest in themselves for just clarity. And
yeah. Okay, I appreciate the ad for the accelerator, but the accelerator has ended and you're on your own now. To someone who's questioning themselves, what would you say?
Still connect with others who are on that journey. Anita and I still connecting with Shri and Kay through email, just letting each other know that we're on that same journey. We can ask each other questions, share our concerns. Also, just give it a try.
Oh my gosh.
There is a little fear in knowing something's out there that's not perfect, but my episode 1 is just not perfect, and I have to sit with that. It doesn't feel good, but it's okay. They get better.
Okay, so even more than you complimenting the templates and the accelerator, hearing that you guys are still connecting, just I could cry. That's exactly what I want out of this thing, so I'm so pleased. Okay, moving on to our rapid fire. Okay, we'll start with our true and false section. True or false, podcasting is harder than I expected.
False.
Podcasting is more fun than I expected.
True.
I overthought things before I began.
True. That's my go-to, overthinking.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. The thing that surprised me most about podcasting is...
I love the editing. I know that's weird.
The hardest part about podcasting has been...
I think for the minisodes was just getting comfortable with my cadence, what I was going to say without being scripted. I had to really think about it in real time. It was hard.
The easiest part of podcasting for me has been...
Oh, the interviewing was way easier than I expected, and it's just beautiful. I almost feel like I get more than anybody else from it, but I don't think that'll be true.
That's the goal. Side note, people don't think about the ROI of the moment of the actual interview. They think about, oh, the clips that I'll send and I'll get exposure to that.
Never thought of it.
I love that. Last fill in the blank, podcasting has made me feel more...
I'd love to say cool, but that's
okay. That's the word that comes to mind.
I think confident. I think in some ways more confident. I don't love my own voice, but I'm comfortable with putting it out there, if that makes sense. So I'm okay with that.
Okay, now we're doing little quick hits. One word to describe your podcasting experience so far.
Learning.
Biggest myth about podcasting.
I mean, the cost of entry is pretty low. I had to pay for some of the editing things, but yeah.
Everybody sees these video sets. I was thinking I want to do content about this, about how like the slick background, and it doesn't have to be like that. No. One thing you'd do differently if starting again.
Nothing.
Okay.
And well, because I had such a good start.
Thank you. Okay. This is a question I ask of people who've been doing this for decades, and in your case, people who've been doing it for months. If you had one piece of advice for someone starting a podcast, what would it be?
Don't overthink it. Just try it. Obviously, the best part is that I don't do anything live. So when I interview somebody and you share this with us too, I tell them, if you say something that you don't like, I'll just edit it. Let's just re-say it. And that was such great permission because I was interviewing someone the other day and I said his name absolutely wrong. And I've known him forever. It was just something with nerves or just getting started. He's like, he has initials. He said, you said my second initial wrong. I'm like, oh my gosh. But you just edit it out. Start again.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it's so freeing.
I'm so glad that editing has been this magical and freeing and wonderful thing for you. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. Where can people find you? Where would you, if people were going to go one place to connect with or learn more or get more from you, where would you point them?
I think I would say my website is the easiest. It's aspiretogrow.co, so C-O. It's my website about what I do. I have a page about the Rooted Leader podcast and the Leader Reflections and the Leader Journey. So it's all there. And additionally, my blog.
Great. So we can get the podcast and all types of Kathleen goodness at Aspire to Grow.
Or you could find my podcast on Apple, YouTube, and Substack, and a few others at the Rooted Leader podcast.
Good. You own that real estate. That's yours now, Kathleen. Okay. Thank you so much. I loved this. Do you feel any different about podcasting than you did like 30-ish minutes ago? Like maybe it feels less abstract, less for other people, less out of reach, more possible, a little less something other people do and maybe something that you could do and not only do, but have fun while doing it and learn more about yourself and the world and other people because of it. And yeah, maybe get some business because of it. I was so struck by that transformation in Kathleen and seeing the fun and joy that it's bringing her. I mean, I know, especially lately, I can be really kind of obsessed with the whole return on investment of it all and how are you converting clients and blah, 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 business. But it can be a both and. It can be a hobby, it can be humorous, it can be joyful, and it can help you grow as an entrepreneur, founder, creator who's making money off their podcast. I don't know. The possibilities feel pretty endless to me, especially hearing Kathleen and knowing her and seeing her go from not ever thinking podcasting was in her future to being literally identified as a podcaster now. She's figuring it out as she goes. She's pivoting quickly when she needs to, which I love. We're not set in stone. This is a malleable format. You decide something doesn't feel right or it's not resonating, switch it up. And she's built something that just a couple of months ago did not exist, and now it does. It's called the Rooted Leader Podcast. Check it out. And when I'm working with aspiring podcasters, you may or may not be one, but here's a little thought experiment. Next time you're thinking about your podcast, stop thinking, stop jotting something down, tapping away at your notes app, and instead record your voice talking about it. Free associate, ramble, whatever. But I like to bring people very quickly from idea, abstract, words on a page, to your voice telling a story, sharing your unique point of view in a file that can exist in a machine or in someone's ears, or eventually, as I am now in front of you, a face on a screen. So I invite you to do that. If you enjoy it and it feels right, or if you're still a little bit stuck, I have just the thing for you. And it's what Kathleen took part in. That's right. I've opened applications for the next cohort of my Podcast Accelerator. If you're looking for a place to explore and experiment and co-create and learn in public with a group of people who are doing the same, ready to support you, to help promote you, to show up on your podcast and invite you to theirs, you might really enjoy being part of the Sounds Great Podcast Accelerator. Applications are open. Go to soundsgreatstrategy.com. It's brief, it's straightforward, and it'll help us figure out if now is the time for you to dive into podcasting. You can also always drop me an email at Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. Until next time, this is Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting with me, Courtney Reimer. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for creating. And please keep doing all of the above.